Good afternoon and welcome to Studio G. I'm Katie Streit. Today we are doing something a little different on Studio G. We have a round table with UNLV students to discuss the upcoming 2020 election. Sitting with me today is Donovan Walker, a self-proclaimed Bernie Sanders supporter, and then Jonah Grepke, a self-proclaimed Donald Trump supporter. Welcome. All right, so we are going to go into our first topic of today. We are going to talk about, do you guys feel safe on campus at UNLV talking about your political beliefs? We're going to start with you since there was a recent threat with the Bernie Sanders supporters and the African American group on campus.
That was definitely a scare for sure, but we need to avoid things like that in the future. But I've never once felt, even after attending a couple of protests with people on the other side of the spectrum, I've never felt in danger for speaking up about my beliefs. So overall, I feel very safe on campus.
Awesome. And I'm going to pass it to you. Do you feel, conservatives are the minority at UNLV. Do you feel safe talking about your political beliefs?
Absolutely. You know, the vast majority of the time, everyone across the political aisle, from students to professors, are more than willing to tolerate and talk about dissenting opinions. So by and large, it is a safe thing to do, to talk about, supporting President Trump, for example. But on occasion, there are some reasons to feel concerned. A couple of weeks ago, during a Turning Point USA tabling on campus, an individual came up and took some of our steins and destroyed them in a fairly violent manner. And so on occasion, there are some reasons to be concerned, but by and large, UNLV is a safe place to be.
And do you feel that, we were talking about the free speech area prior to filming, but do you feel that kind of is strange being in the U.S. where we have the First Amendment and we have free speech everywhere? We're supposed to at least have free speech everywhere.
Yeah, well, obviously, the United States government does place some restrictions on certain rights, time, place, and manner restrictions. And freedom of speech is one of those rights. I think, though, that what they call the free speech area, or the free speech walk, is more so a way to kind of keep tables and booths condensed into one area. I don't think they're particularly saying that you can't, shout your beliefs anywhere else on campus. That being said, it is weird that they named it that. That's what it's called. It does seem to place more restrictions on students in an environment that should bolster diversity of thought. But I think by and large, it's just something they call it.
And I feel like this is a rare occasion. We have a liberal and a Republican talking with each other. Do you feel like you're straying away from being able to talk to people who have different political beliefs than what I would have and what you would have and what you would have?
We are definitely living in an increasingly polarized society. You can sit and debate the reasons behind that all day, but we are definitely straying away from being able to have civil conversations between people on the other side, and that's what this country is all about. Like, you can't get anywhere with just being stuck in your political echo chamber and not talking to people that you don't necessarily agree with. And I've always found it very productive. Like, the other person and I will usually walk away knowing, okay, like, I didn't agree with him on this, or he didn't agree with me on that, but we had a very good discussion, and we're always willing to, like, yep, you made a fair point, I made a fair point. So we are straying away from that, and it makes me kind of sad, but hopefully we can get back to that at some point, or we can have civil discussions with people we don't agree with and walk away feeling like it was a good, productive conversation.
I'll turn that same question to you. Do you believe that it's hard to have conversations with the other side of the party?
I think it's kind of an interesting question, because I think when we look at what the media has to say, there is a lot of conflict, but we have to think about, is that actually because individuals like Donovan and I are not willing to have a conversation with each other? Or is it because the incidents of conflict are what drive media attention? I think generally people like Donovan and myself are still willing to come together and have an honest dialogue.
Do you think that the media, you were saying how the media kind of portrays conflict, especially, I mean, you turn on the news, there's always something going on, Donald Trump, something's going on in DC with the US Capitol. Do you believe that the media has a hand in that, where we are being more polarized because of that, or with, or was it with the 2016 election where a lot of people are thinking?
I don't think it's the media's fault, but I certainly don't think it was any candidate in the 2016 election's fault either. I think as far as the media is concerned, conflict is news. People getting along isn't necessarily news, so you're not required to report that or even obligated to. So I think it's just kind of the nature of what actually is reportable, and I think that's part of it.
I'll turn the same kind of question to you, Donovan. Like, do you believe that it's easier to have a conversation with a Trump supporter? Is it easier to have a conversation with a Bernie Sanders supporter?
As for my perspective, easier for me to. I can conversate with anybody without any problems whatsoever. And what Jonah said was true about the media. Conflict sells. It most definitely does. And our generation is mostly the Twitter generation. And a video on Twitter of someone like Jonah and I having a nice conversation about our disagreements is not going to blow up like some protesters screaming at each other. So yeah.
So maybe social media is what is driving the polarization.
It's a fact. It's a whole wide range of things that I'm not educated enough to talk about in depth. But the media and social media definitely play a part because, like you said, conflict sells.
Yeah.
It's a lot of attention.
So let's talk about actual policy that Donald Trump has mentioned, and as well as Bernie Sanders, since both of them are coming up into the 2020 election. Bernie Sanders is a self-proclaimed democratic socialist, and a lot of his supporters are democratic socialists. Can you explain to the viewers what democratic socialism is?
Sure. There's been multiple definitions for democratic socialists that have been thrown around, and it's honestly a lot of the times linked to full socialism and communism. I consider myself a democratic socialist. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist. I do believe that there is a necessary free market to have where people can compete with one another to make a profit. But at the end of the day, myself and other democratic socialists believe that there's certain things in society like education, healthcare, food, housing, all kinds of things that should just be basic human rights and not be profitized off of. But then we can still allow for a relatively free market where people can be entrepreneurs and use their skills to the best of their ability. But we still need to have a strong safety net to guarantee equality of opportunity to all.
And you were talking on some, like free healthcare, free education. Do you think that's feasible with a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters and a lot of people who are against Bernie Sanders have said maybe that's not all feasible with our economy in America? Yeah,
there's definitely valid points on that side, and I would tell anybody watching this to Bernie Sanders has released plans on how he plans to pay for everything, and so you can look at that yourself and see whether you think that is feasible or not. But I personally do. We've spent trillions of dollars in overseas wars and corporate subsidies and bank bailouts and stuff like that. So if we can afford all of that stuff, we can definitely afford to restructure our government spending in a certain way to where it can benefit all Americans. And when people say it's free, it's not really free. Like, we're already paying into Medicare and Social Security as it is. It's just who's going to pay for that, who's going to pay more for that, and how the structure of that payment's going to be. I do believe it's feasible.
And I'll turn that same question to you. Do you think democratic socialism is feasible within America? I know Donald Trump has spoken about this multiple times.
I don't think it is, for a couple of reasons. First, there is a question of how we're going to pay for it. I really love the idea that we would be able to provide free health care to all American citizens, but at the end of the day, we have to actually look at the numbers. And you can basically have two of three things rather, when it comes to healthcare. You can have cheap healthcare, you can have universal healthcare, and you can have quality healthcare. You only get to pick two of the three. And if we're going for free, and if we're going for universal, the quality is going to take a hit. How much is up for debate, but that is part of the discussion, certainly.
I'll turn that. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, he definitely raises a fair point about how quality might possibly take a hit. You know, there's all these stories, these accurate stories about situations in Canada and the UK where they do have government-sponsored health insurance where they have longer wait times, and that's definitely a concern to be addressed. But according to the World Health Organization, countries with universal health care don't have much of a difference in outcome of health care, but they do have, compared to us, they don't have much of a difference in outcome, but they do have a difference in access, which we are severely lacking in. So there's definitely points to be made that sure, quality could possibly take a hit, but then there's also, I think, more than enough proof that guaranteeing healthcare to everybody as a human right, as a right of citizenship, is the way to go, and we're not going to see our healthcare system collapse because of it.
And we're going to go on to the next topic. Currently we have an impeachment inquiry with our president. Democrats are for this, and conservatives, the majority of them, are against it. What is your opinion of the impeachment inquiry? Do you believe the Democrats are just against Trump, or what? As a conservative, what do you believe?
So you phrased that question very interestingly, and here's why. You said that liberals or Democrats are in favor of the impeachment inquiry, but you said most conservatives are not. I would just refer you to the actual vote on the impeachment inquiry. The vote was bipartisan against the impeachment inquiry, but was strictly Democrats voting for it. So I think that tells a lot about what people actually think and if the inquiry is actually legitimate.
And we've had a lot of Nevada politicians for it, like Susie Lee, Dina Titus. What do you, being in Southern Nevada, do you believe that people in Nevada are educated on what's going on in Washington, D.C.?
I think some are. I think a lot of people put a lot of effort into looking into exactly what's going on. But I think far too many people just don't really care and are more willing to take the word of Democrat politicians on what's actually going on. And I think it's very important that people go online, they read the transcript of the call that's turned so many heads, and actually see if they think, not taking in what other people's opinions are, but just read it and see what you think.
And I'll turn the same kind of question to you. And
Sure.
also, does social media have a hand in kind of the impeachment process?
It depends on what context. Like, the impeachment process is always, regardless of who it is very deep. There's a lot of reading required that involves why someone's getting impeached. So I think, especially with our generation, no one's going to read why the Democrats are trying to impeach Donald Trump. I mean, I don't see it a lot on social media either, that it's going around that they're trying to impeach him. But I don't know how much of an effect social media has on that. But the only thing I worry about with the impeachment inquiry is that it's going to take news time away from actual issues affecting the American people. I personally believe that there is enough to impeach Donald Trump. But my worry is that that's what all the media is going to focus on. The media is not going to focus on all the other problems that regular, everyday Americans are dealing with. They're just going to focus on what Nancy Pelosi said, what Trump tweeted, what Chuck Schumer just said. I just hope if they do really dive deep into this route that they'll actually be able to not dominate media cycles for 24/7, and we can actually go about other business in this country just besides impeaching the president. So
You said you were for impeachment.
I would, if I was
Why?
sitting in
Yeah.
Congress, I would vote for impeachment, because it's not necessarily about the Joe Hunter Biden thing. I think they're going about it the wrong way. I would get him on the emoluments clause if that was going through Congress, because he's been openly seen as, he still owns the Trump Tower, and he's had Saudi officials staying in the Trump Tower paying inflated rates for rooms, and I do believe that violates emoluments clause, because when Jimmy Carter became president, he had to sell his peanut farm in Georgia because they were worried about the emoluments clause. And then we have Trump that still owns his business and has Saudi Arabian officials still staying there. So that is the route that I would go down. But I care more about other things affecting the American people, because Trump's Trump, And the 2020 election's coming up soon anyway. Like, the people can speak their minds. Like, by the time the impeachment inquiry and everything is going to be done, where it's going to be time to vote. So it is one thing I'm torn on. I would say yes, I would vote on it, but I just hope that our politicians, if they're going to do that, can do it correctly and do it the right way and still leave us a country to have to live in. So
you've talked about how the media is going through a 24/7 cycle on this impeachment inquiry, and that the 2020 election is coming up.
Yeah.
So do you think there is some, I don't know if it's, conspiracy theory on people trying to sway voters into thinking more for Democratic candidates?
I haven't seen enough evidence to think so. Despite what people think that, oh, CNN's super biased, oh, Fox is super biased, they usually keep pretty well objective in the middle, both of them, depending on the segment. So I don't really think there's some deep conspiracy to elect Democrats, because even before the impeachment inquiry started, the majority of American people supported impeachment. It wasn't a huge majority, but it was definitely there. So that's not something I'm too concerned about. I don't think that's what's behind it. I think it's just politics as usual and people just trying to toe the party line and get seen on TV.
I'll turn the question to you. Do you think that Trump should give up all ties to Trump Towers while being president?
I think that's something that should be up to smarter people than I. I would say generally I think that would be a good idea, but there are certain aspects of his business that I'm just not privy to. So I don't know to what extent that would need to take place. I'm certainly not aware of what Donovan was talking about earlier with Saudi officials. I haven't seen anything about that. So I just don't know that I'm qualified enough to speak on that.
And we'll go into another topic that's, again, controversial, immigration. We have a lot of immigrants in Las Vegas. It's in our community. Can be an issue that's going to be a huge factor in the 2020 election. Talk about Trump's stance on it for people who live under a rock.
Sure. So President Trump has been pretty clear about this. He's very much in support of legal immigration. He welcomes immigrants who want to come into this country and be a part of its success. But he is against people coming into this country illegally. It is against the law, so that's why I phrase it like that. They're illegal immigrants. So he's been pretty clear about this. He wants to build a wall on the southern border to prevent some of that illegal immigration. Certainly that wouldn't solve the entire problem, but it is a good first step.
And what is Bernie Sanders' stance on it?
So Bernie Sanders, for those who might be confused, does not support open borders. He supports increasing funding for border security, so Customs and Border Patrol can do what they need to do to protect our borders, but he does not support a wall, and he does not support the efforts of deportation under Barack Obama and under Trump as well. And my personal belief on the issue is that I would rather people come here legally, go through the proper legal channels, but I understand that takes a long time. And a lot of the people that came here illegally and are here were dealing with a lot of stuff that I do believe if I was in that situation, I would have done anything I can to get out. And so how I like to frame the issue is more from a factual base, not emotionally. Like, we already have 10 to 20 million undocumented people here now. So now that they're here, and we know that they're here, what should we do? Because deporting is very, very expensive. They're already contributing to the economy, to society. They have families, they have communities. So the question is, what do we do with them now that they're here? And I would personally give them, if they're not, felons or terrible criminals, I would give them an easy path to citizenship so they can start paying taxes on the money that they already make and become legal, fully integrated parts of our communities.
Do you mind if I comment on that?
Yes.
So I think a pathway to citizenship is frankly a good idea. I would be in full support of that once we secure the border.
Sure.
It's certainly an issue that requires a lot of in-depth thought, but the way I see it is fairly simple. we can't be giving a quick and easy pathway to citizenship for people who have already immigrated illegally if we haven't first shut the border. We don't want mass flows of immigrants here, not just for our economy, but for their safety. According to Amnesty International, something like 80% of the women who come in the migrant caravans are raped or sexually assaulted. It is a dangerous proposition for them. It is seriously dangerous, and I'm concerned, not just for the United States, but also for their safety.
Do you hear to comment on
Yeah,
that?
it's you're talking about how it's more dangerous for them to actually immigrate here, like that whole like them coming from Central America up here is dangerous.
It's very unsafe to come here illegally, whereas if they were to be coming legally, they would have an easier way to just essentially fly into the country.
That is a fair point, but more than 60% of the people who are here illegally came in legally. They either drove in through the border, they had their passports and their visas, or they just flew in and overstayed their visa. You know, you get your passport stamped at customs, and they just didn't listen to the date that they were commanded to leave by on their passport. So the majority of people that are here illegally came in the legal way. So there is definitely a lot of work to be done on the border, but this isn't an issue I can speak die hard about because I know that there's already 10 to 20 million people here illegally, so it's just what do we do? What's the most feasible, what's the most humane, and what's the safest route we can go? And my personal belief is that they do, if they've been here, they do deserve a path to citizenship instead of spending all of our tax dollars on deporting these people or just still having them here without paying taxes on their income, paying into Medicare and Social Security, which the three of us, I assume, already do. So that's just my opinion on the issue.
And I'll leave with like one last question, then we'll finish everything up. Do you believe that we need to continue like immigration with, sorry, let me rephrase this. With kind of what Donovan was saying, there already are a bunch of people here. People wait 20 years, 30 years, whatever, like an extremely long time. How can we maybe decrease that? Because that's kind of one of the issues that I know Donovan's been talking about. A lot of other Democratic candidates have been talking about trying to reform immigration, not having illegal immigration, but having just a reform.
Sure. Well, let's be frank about this. America, in my view, is the greatest country in the world, and a lot of people want to come here. We have economic prosperity. We have a lot of freedoms that a lot of other countries don't. And many, many, many people want to come here and better their lives, and that's commendable. And I hope that everyone is in favor of legal and beneficial immigration. I think because there are so many people who want to come here, it is going to take a fairly long time to get into this country. It's just a matter of demand. Now, I would say that it's interesting that the same people who want to radically open the borders are also pointing to countries like Norway and other Nordic countries who have some of the strictest immigration laws in the world. So I think that it's okay that we have a long process because of the demand. And because we need to make sure that these people are not looking to harm the national security of the United States.
Any closing statements?
Yeah, he's right about it taking a long time. I don't know how much can be done because it's just a big bureaucratic process and it's just almost impossible to staff it fully to where everybody gets in a timely manner. And it's like when I went to the DMV to get my driver's license, I waited in line for like 2.5 hours. I mean, that's just to get a driver's license. So immigration is definitely a much bigger process, and it does take time. I do think if there's unnecessary stuff that can be cut out to save time, it should be, but I am not educated enough to say what policies on someone immigrating are good and what are bad for the most part. But, and he mentioned the Nordic countries having strict, which is true, they do. And like I said, I'm not in support of open borders. I do believe we need to have a structure where we know who's coming into our country. But so he and I agree on that, but I think we just differ on what to do with the immigrants when they're here. if they're here illegally. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Well, I think this was such a great conversation, and thank you guys for coming and talking about your beliefs and being civil with everything. I think that's something that we don't see a lot.
That is very true.
With both sides of the party. So I'm very glad that you guys came on the show today. And if you guys want any more information, we hope to do this again very shortly. Thank you again for coming on the show with us, and we will see you tomorrow, Studio G audience, for our regular newscast. I'm Katie Straight. Hope you enjoy.